Welcome back to the PFC podcast. The views and opinions you are about to hear are the speakers and do not necessarily reflect those of anyone else. Now on to the podcast.
Welcome back to the PFC podcast. This is Dennis, and today I am with Reagan. How are you doing today?
I'm great. How are you?
I'm doing well. And so the reason why I asked you to come on and you were so gracious to come on is you wrote a thesis on something that is near and dear to my heart, which is unconventional medical networks and how do we get these things started? There's a lot of unknowns, and this is definitely something that like everybody is focused on. So since this is the first time on our podcast, would you mind doing just a real quick introduction of yourself?
Yeah, sure. So first of all, thanks for having me on. My name is Reagan Lyon. I am an emergency medicine physician. I've been in the Air Force for 17 years now. Most of my time since residency has been within special operations, although I've done a couple of other things here and there. My most recent, so I'm currently stationed in Washington, D.C. Before I came here to Washington, D.C., I was at the Naval Postgraduate School when I did my thesis. And right before that, I was on the special operations surgical teams. So the reason that I got my attention is the special operations surgical teams participate in Trojan Footprint with SOCAR in Europe. And there was, that was the first time of really starting to talk about like this, unconventional warfare kind of scenario. And it really got us thinking about what does that look like? Because we are still in the midst of the Middle East and the conflict going on there and supporting those missions. So it was a little bit out of our wheelhouse, and that's what kind of got me interested in all this.
Nice. So, kind of like you just mentioned, this is kind of a big question out there. I mean, why would you, for a thesis for a college program, why would you pick something that is almost unanswerable versus just writing another, pat on the back, like, look what we did in Afghanistan, look what we did in Iraq, we won. Why would you tackle something that nobody actually knows the answer to?
Because one, if no one knows the answer to it, then they can't tell me I'm wrong.
That's true.
But the other piece to it is because I'm a masochist and I just wanted to take on this like beast of a project in my, by myself for over 18 months. The real down to earth reason though, is because I don't like wasting my time. I don't like putting time into something that either has been written out 15,000 times or is not going to actually benefit anything. If I put in blood, sweat, and tears into something, then it better benefit someone. And I took Rocky Farr. So Rocky Farr wrote this monograph on the death of the golden hour and talked a lot about this resurgence in guerrilla hospitals and whatnot. And in my fascination that I talked about from, Trojan Footprint and these kinds of scenarios, I read his monograph and became even more like, oh, wow, like we have a problem that we're, potentially facing in the future. The irony of it is I started school in June of 2020 and I graduated in December of 2021. And then in February of 2022, Ukraine kicked off. Mm-hmm. And it was at that time that I realized that I don't know why the thesis necessarily, like I was so intensely focused on it. But it became very realistic. It was borderline predicting future of, what kind of worst scenarios are we going to be looking at in the future. So,
yeah. And, I definitely like your answer of like, don't waste your time just patting yourself on the back or paying lip service to something. At least tackle something worthwhile. Even if you fall somewhat short, you're still moving the ball forward,
Academics are all about people picking up balls that, still need carrying. Academics doesn't end. And so there's always going to be someone that comes in behind you to do more. Like Rocky Rocky's monograph's awesome. It's a historical reflection of the previous conflicts that we've had, and then talking about why we're going to be looking towards things in the future. But he doesn't even really start getting into the how we go about doing that, or like what is needed to go do that. He touches on it, but he really focuses on the historical content and learning lessons from history. I do that in my thesis. I did that certainly to set the stage of like, this is why it's important. But I started trying to look at okay, if we're going to do this, then what is it, or how are we going to do it? My goal was to come up with the answer of like, this is your recipe for creating an indigenous system to be able to provide medical care. I couldn't even do that without setting the stage of like, okay, let's almost a mission analysis. What are our limitations, constraints? What are the tasks that we have to get done? So I had to lay that groundwork. So someone else needs to pick up, from where I left off and start fleshing this out a little bit more.
Yeah. So like you said, with any kind of mission analysis, you have to start with your knowns. Mm-hmm. So like, what kind of knowns do we have to start working with?
Well, we have Doctrine, okay. And we have our manuals that exist already. So, pubs, manuals, instructions. We have history. So what happened in the past and how did we do things in the past? And then we have the expectations and the promises that we've made to our soldiers, sailor, airmen, Marines, of we're going to, take care of them when they get hurt and provide some kind of medical care and get them back home. So, I mean, those are some just general examples. I started, like I said, I laid the groundwork of historically, like where we come from. And I actually took Doctrine based off of how we define medicine and medical care in the casualty care system. And then I applied it to like, okay, let's put that in this unconventional warfare scenario, this scenario where things are a little bit different, and is it applicable? Because if it is, then we can just use that doctrine and then talk about what kind of things are needed in there. If it doesn't, then you have to start from scratch even with that.
Yeah. So, historics, World War II, we have MASH units, you have conventional military hospital systems relatively close to the front, but you also had things like, what was described in different books, like the parachute ward, the Guerrilla hospital, the Black Scalpel, where these were OSS surgeons kicked out of an airplane over enemy controlled territory, and they're running a guerrilla hospital. So, I mean, we have almost completely different contexts of environments. How do we kind of replicate one while simultaneously relearning old lessons for the other? And how do these things actually mesh together? Because they're going to have to.
Yeah. Great question.
It's unknown, right?
How long is this podcast?
Yeah, as long as we want it.
I think some things that we have to take. So first of all, World War II, you have to take the context that they were in. So of that time period, right? So they don't have all the technology and whatnot that we have currently in this day and age. That's a good thing and a bad thing, right? So a good thing because we have things like ultrasounds and whatnot that can help us do diagnostics. It's a bad thing because everyone and their mother has access to the internet, and there's now new ways of tracking people and things and whatnot. So what can be one of the greatest tools that we have to us to make our lives easier can also make it way more dangerous for our people. So it's a give and take. It's not necessarily a better situation that we're going to be in the future. It's not necessarily a worse one either. It all depends on the perspective. So when you look at World War II, and Yugoslavia is like a really good example of this situation. The Partisans were resisting Germany's occupation of Yugoslavia, and A really good reference for this is, as you mentioned, Guerrilla Surgeon. It's by a New Zealand doc that actually was part of the British Army. And he got himself, because he was born in Africa, and so he got himself into Yugoslavia to help with the Partisans. He was a single doc, and he kind of made his way and made friends with the Partisans and built that trust, and then got some medics and some medical students and started building this network of hospitals and teaching them how to take care of people. The benefit of the Partisans in that situation is, so because it was occupied by Germany, like they couldn't trust certain community, they couldn't trust everybody. So like, it's almost like in plain sight, you're existing, but your partisans are going out and having insurgent moments against Germany when the tactics and the timing are right. And then the community that was sympathizers with the Partisans would bring in casualties, would house partisans, would, have supplies and whatnot. So it's like these hospitals could be inside someone's house for a certain period of time. They could be in the jungle. They could be completely like hidden away. And there were things that they saw that we see now, right? Like one of the things that was came out of that book or that conflict was, if the guerrilla hospital was closer to the fighting where everything was going on, then they saw more critical patients and they could actually impact and do something about the critical patients and potentially save their lives. The problem with that, though, is they were also closer to the fighting, closer to where the mass amount of German soldiers were. And so there was a higher likelihood that they were going to get caught and compromised. And therefore, it was a bigger risk to the hospital. If they pulled the hospital back and put it in a more secure area where it takes like 3 checkpoints to get through and wander through the woods, then they were a lot safer. They didn't have to move as much. They could be bigger, but they also didn't see the critical patients because the critical patients died before they got to that hospital. So it was a give and take. And he noted throughout that whole book some of these lessons, which we know based off of like the closer to the fight you are, when someone gets injured, the more likely you are to be able to save them. But the closer that you are to the fight, you have to have that tactical training to be able to navigate that situation. So that's stuff that we know. The difference, though, is that environment, like the tactical situation of what we've been dealing with the last 20 years is not the same as the tactical situation that we're going to be dealing with in a situation like that, where there's an occupation or a semi-contested environment or what have you.
Yeah. I mean, like so much of technology is different, compared now versus then. Then you have scouts. Now you have to be worried about the battle lines moving, fluctuating back and forth. That's kind of the same, but now you have drones.
Yep.
Long-range drones, hypersonic missiles, all kinds of craziness.
You also have, something interesting that's happened in the news recently is the Iranian protests. And the Iranian protests they've had over, a long period of time. But the more recent ones and all the open source reporting that was going on about it brought to light another situation that we potentially going to be facing that we haven't really had to think about. Protesters would get injured and they would have very obvious injuries because what the government officials were using against protesters, right? And so those people would have injuries that needed care. So they would seek care in the hospitals thinking that's the best option for them. But Iranian officials were infiltrating the hospitals and looking for those injury patterns and then taking them either into custody or interrogating them. So it got to a point where the Iranian doctors were going underground themselves to be able to go to people's houses and take care of them and provide care. And then in some instances, patients were even telehealthing with doctors in the United States or other countries that had an Iranian background that wanted to help their people and basically teach them how to take care of themselves at home via, this telemedicine thing. So telemedicine, great, right? But if you're not protected, you can also find someone using IP addresses and whatnot through that. So again, it's a different method, but there's still risk associated with it.
Yep. Yeah, unfortunately, there's no way around that. It's just picking and choosing where you can locate, what kind of fixed footprint that you are willing to put down, and then how fast, how long you're willing to stay. So one of the things you mentioned in your kind of knowns, medic training, blood supply, hospital capacity, evacuation, routes.
Yeah.
Like how,
so
yeah.
Go
please.
ahead. So I think it's important to, let's lay the groundwork for this doctrine that I mentioned. So the doctrine for our healthcare system, you have role 1s, 2s, 3s, and 4s.
Yep.
And that's how it's defined. Role 1s has, in my opinion, a pretty wide range of what role 1 care can be, because it ranges anywhere from the instant that the patient gets injured to a physician or a physician's assistant that can do some advanced resuscitation and procedures, but can't do surgery, like not a surgeon. That is a whole swath of potential care that a patient can get within that one role, like that one echelon. Role 2 is where you have your first surgeon, you can do damage control surgery. And if you look at Doctrine and how the services define that can range anywhere from like a 5-person team to a 20 some odd person team. And like your footprint, as you mentioned, could be a truckload of supplies, or it can be backpacks on the back. And one role 2 could have x-rays and the next one could have just an ultrasound. So there's a wide range in there. Then you get to role 3s, and that's where you have your more hardened hospitals. And in theory, based off of Doctrine, both NATO and US, you're supposed to have like a CT scanner and you're supposed to have oxygen. And so now, as you can see, when we're getting into this more denied environment, and if you picture what's happening in Ukraine, right? Us going and setting up a role 3 hospital or someone like NATO hospital, that's a role 3 in Ukraine, is going to have a huge target on their back. And so that's where everything starts breaking down at that point. And then when you look at role 4s are extra theater. So it's Launch Dual Hospital for the United States. We're even coming back to Walter Reed, like in the US. And if you're looking at a guerrilla, so like the Yugoslavians in World War II, Yugoslavian partisans didn't have a United States to fly back to, like their country. And so like their hospitals are in Yugoslavia, right? So role 4 isn't even applicable to them. So that's where this all starts breaking down of role 3, so all that's really applicable in a UW situation is a role 1 or role 2 based off how it's defined right now. So I started and then I said, okay, so let's look at Yugoslavia. If that's the case, then how do you define different levels of care? Like how do you tier this the way it should be to give you some kind of goals to set if you're going to set up an indigenous system to take care of casualties during such a conflict? And the answer is based off of treatment, not based off of capabilities. So to what level are you providing treatment? And when you break down the articles, and there's tons since in the last 20 years, but there was one that was published in 2003, and it took the preventable deaths from Vietnam and broke it down. And I used Vietnam because Vietnam's kind of similar to these environments. I didn't necessarily want to take Afghanistan and Iraq because different kind of situation. But if you look at the preventable deaths, they broke it down in categories. So like tension pneumothorax, airway, extremity hemorrhage, torso hemorrhage, shock, and infection, sepsis. Those are all different categories that are taken care of by things like TCCC. It takes care of airway, pneumothorax, extremity hemorrhage. You have damage control surgery, which takes care of torso hemorrhage. You have advanced resuscitation capabilities. So whether or not that's your prolonged field care that you do advanced resuscitation with, or whether or not that's like a PA or a doc that, is an advanced resuscitation team, and they can help with the sepsis and the shock, or at least help prevent the sepsis and shock. And then definitive care can also take care of that shock and sepsis issues on the back end of things too. So I broke it down based off of that and talked about like which level of care takes care of which category of preventable deaths, because that's measurable, right?
Okay.
Like at each stage. So that's what I did. And so to your point and your original question that I totally got off on this tangent on of like, let's talk about the measurable restrictions. I used a process called systems dynamics. So all the things that you mentioned they're all factors that come into this casualty care thing, but they have their own system of systems. So training a medic is not just as easy as like, tonight you're trained, right? Like there's a process to it. Like you have an accession of medics, the medics get trained. Once the medics get trained, they go out into the field, and there's a higher demand of medics because there's more people out on the battlefield, and it goes into this little loop. The same thing with blood products. So like the more casualties that get hurt, the more blood that's needed. Therefore, there's more blood that needs to be drawn. There's more patients that need to have blood screens, and then it starts going into this loop. So I did this systems analysis and identified like all these tangible things that come into this process, and where are the choke points, for lack of a better term. Like at what point does it have an effect on the system? So if one part is affected, it decreases the amount of patients that can be treated through a system. And that's where it came down to, obviously, like the number of people you have trained is going to have an effect on how much care you can provide. The amount of blood that you can give is going to have an effect on how many resuscitations you can do in teaching a trauma patients. Evacuations, if you can't move a patient, and that's not just evacuations from the battlefield to the United States, that's evacuations from point of injury to the next point that they can receive care. So even intra-theater patient movement, same thing. If you can't move a patient, that patient's not like, they're eventually going to succumb. If they have a life-threatening injury, they are not like, there's going to be an endpoint, right? And you're going to be backed up to be able to take care of more patients. So everything stops. So all those things come into play and become these like very tangible, very real things that have an effect on the flow of casualties. So.
Yeah, absolutely. Just out of curiosity, kind of the algorithm or the program that you helped create or created, with the conflict happening in Ukraine, like you mentioned, it's like a live video game. Watching your model go out, like are you, like how well does your model fit with what's actually happening?
Yeah. So the systems dynamics fits, like looking at these tangible limitations, they fit. So that process that's not quantifiable necessarily. It's definitely qualitative in nature, but we're seeing that easily. So, for example, beginning of the conflict, all these people were getting injured. Ukraine was having a hard time with a lot of things, but they were having a hard time like finding the people that could be able to provide the care. So there's a lot of NGOs or a lot of other organizations that showed up to be able to help them provide that care. And as more people who were trained got there, and they got more training on battlefield care of like, how do you treat war wounds, then Ukrainian medical providers, whether or not that be medical students, medics, doctors, whatever, could do more for patients. And so they are now advancing their own stuff. So that just shows like, if you're limited on the number of people that can provide care, you're going to have a lot more patients like succumb to their injuries versus you increase the number of providers, you have more people able to provide care. You saw it with like the medical students, as I mentioned, they just started doing things out of their normal scope of practice because they needed more hands. So it enlisted kind of this whole of society, like, hey, we're bringing you into the mix. You have some kind of training. We're now going to, put you on the job and on the spot and do it. Blood has been something that has been talked about by the people giving lectures that have been over there in Ukraine. And their ability to store blood has been, a limitation for them to be able to really do a lot capacity. So the hospitals, either because they get destroyed or because they just run out of space, that limits their ability to take care of people. And then patients have to be moved to a different location or they just can't be treated. So, all that it's playing out, it's showing us, in fact, the last 20 years, those kinds of things have showed us, you don't have enough blood, you can't treat enough trauma patients, they're not going to do well. Now the model itself, so that was the systems analysis. When I put it into an actual model, the idea behind it and what I wanted to do was be able to scale it to show okay, if we have this battlefield, and we have X amount of fighters, U.S. and partner forces, and we have an injury rate of X amount that's distributed over this, I don't know the exact numbers off the top of my head. It was 50% minimal, 3% instantly killed in action, 10% immediates, and et cetera, et cetera. And so you come up with a distribution that's consistent with most of the data that has been published as far as, what comes out of conflict. How many medics do you need? How much of this do you need? And be able to scale it. And that way we can figure out how many surgical teams do we need out there, how many field hospitals, et cetera. Limitations of the software did not let me get to that point. What it ended up doing, however, was all the limitations that I had identified previously, both the tangible and the intangible ones, that was true. And it showed choke points through it. So it basically validated, because you could see patients as they flowed through the system. It showed that if you adjusted certain things, like the ability for moving patients between one place and another, that it affected the patient buildup at that location. And then obviously that location is going to be overwhelmed and they just can't take care of the patient. So you could visually see it happen in real time, which was cool. I got invited to take my model to a different, one of our allied countries, because they were going through they're re-looking at how their medical force structure is. And they had me redo it for their scenario. And I ran through that thing 50 times a day for a week. Basically redid my thesis. And it actually proved to be a whole lot more useful than I gave it credit for in the beginning, but it still can't. Or I'm sure it can. I'm sure it can with someone who actually is a systems engineer, but I couldn't get it to scale to just spit out a number of this is how many field hospitals you need or whatever. So.
Right. Chat GPT.
I'm sure AI is way better at this than I am. I was just happy to finish it and that it worked to be able to publish my thesis.
Right. But, we were mentioning, number of hospitals, able to accommodate for X number of patients. That's one thing, is having the skill in place. Another thing is having the supplies in place, which is a completely different animal altogether.
Oh, yeah. So, supplies. So going back to Guerrilla Surgeon, Yugoslavia, one of the things that they noticed is when they got overrun or when they potentially got compromised and the Germans found out their location, took all the supplies, ruined the hospital. And if all the supplies that they had was there, then they now had nothing. And so they had to figure out how to go beg, borrow, and steal from other locations or, allies and somehow get supplies brought into them. But they basically started this system of caches, underground, whether or not that's literally buried or put into a building of some sort, where they can go then if they got compromised and resupply themselves. Also, if they ran out of stuff. So it was almost like a complete, what we used to call increment of, whatever we had with us. They had located somewhere else, but they also had supplies to resupply them throughout the time of taking care of patients. But if you run out of that stuff and you're in a foreign country and you can't get resupplies, what are your options? And one of the thoughts that I have now is, okay, we're so used to, so the last 20 years, we've had such great resupply, right? Like, yes, we were in dangerous locations. People were trying to shoot down helicopters and kill, US people and whatnot. But we had a pretty good freedom of movement to be able to move things in and out of there. Like, we had air superiority and could get things in pretty quickly and get patients out. And so we had the luxury of being able to fly from the United States, US supplies that we are used to in big trauma centers, right? And fly them into country and then have some mechanism of getting that to a forward location. And even though in some forward locations you had to be a little creative with something, like you may not have had a CAT scanner or, something super fancy, you still had, the US made chest tubes, you had all these things available to you. What if you're in a country and you have all your supplies taken, or you use all your supplies and there is no medical supply chain, and you can't just walk into a medical supply store and buy something off the shelf? It's not going to be that simple. And so what do you really need? And this comes down to a really important point with all this is the medicine doesn't change. The medicine is going to be the same. If you have a collapsed lung or you have someone with a pneumothorax, you have to decompress that lung, and you have to have a means of air escaping the pleural area. And that way it can re-expand and the patient can, start oxygenating again. You don't have to have a special tube to do that. Like, the physics behind it is you just have to, you just have to have a finger thoracostomy and decompress the chest that way. So when we're looking at some of the stuff that we're using, are we actually thinking about what is the physiology behind the tools that we're using, and can we recreate that with something off the shelf if we absolutely have to? Going back to MacGyver, right? And we've MacGyvered some stuff ourselves, like putting Christmas trees on stuff and jerry rigging things together. But what if you don't have those medical tools available to you? Can you get something off the shelf of a hardware store and utilize it to be able to meet the needs of whatever medical care that you're getting?
Yeah,
and the problem
absolutely.
is you can't really, to some extent you can teach tricks like that, but if you don't know what country you're going in and you don't know what they have in their supplies, your cognitive ability to start thinking through those problems and be a little bit more agile with, dealing with those problem sets, it's going to be a higher demand on us in the future. It's not going to be as simple as just picking up the next tube that you have lying there. It's going to be more challenging for everyone involved.
Yeah, absolutely. And we saw it during COVID. An example, talking about pneumothorax, a trauma surgeon that I know, they were running out of chest tubes, and apparently at this night they ran out. So he placed a ET tube with the Heimlich valve. It worked. Everything worked just fine. And then overnight, maybe they had gotten some kind of resupply, but that was the first thing that you mentioned. It was a resident or the attending coming back on. He couldn't cognitively understand that this is okay. So the first thing he did was rip the tube out and place in something else. And now he wasted two things.
Right. Exactly. And so being okay with doing those things, like if you're meeting your mark, you may not be perfect, but it's working, and the patient's doing okay. So to your point, like, why waste two things? Why? I mean, again, I'm sitting here in the United States, not in a conflict zone, not facing this thing, but and this is going to sound really bad, but there are some things you could probably wash and reuse again if you had to. That's obviously not normal practice, but figuring out what those things are, I've advocated to people I know within the Uniformed Services University that we need to do a lab of some sort to look at this, like put students in a lab, give them, a handful of cash, have them go to whatever non-medical store that they want to, get a range of supplies and just practice MacGyver stuff. It's not so much to like, okay, this is a checklist of things that you need to be able to MacGyver XYZ. The exercise is just being able to think outside the box and understand the physiology behind what you're treating to be able to figure out the tools that you need to do it. Because all these things that have been made by American manufacturers or any manufacturer for that started with someone playing around with some kind of stuff that they had already. And then they just talked to an engineer and was like, okay, let's make this better. So like it started out of just playing with what they had available to them. So I think that's one way that we could potentially deal with the problem. Obviously, if we're able to, if we know ahead of time where potentially something's going to happen, we have the ability to put things there, these caches and whatnot, and that way you have extra supplies. That's obviously great, but sometimes that's not possible. And so we have to be able to be prepared. And it's becoming very clear that it's not going to be as easy as what we have had in the last 20 years, that we're just going to be able to fly something to whoever that needs, a resupply. So, yeah.
Shifting focus just a little bit, another aspect you mentioned is the social networking, kind of the whole of society type approach, and you already mentioned it. How do you even begin? How do you evaluate another system which has completely different educational system? They have completely different protocols, and then us coming in and saying, you're wrong. We're going to re-educate you on these other things.
Yeah. Well, first of all, we have to be pretty cognizant of the fact that Americans, just because we've been doing this for 20 years and we're the US and we've done the most of it, like we've had the largest footprint of medical personnel in these locations, and so have the most historical knowledge behind it, doesn't necessarily mean that we're right. And it doesn't necessarily mean that we're the ones with the most experience of how to work in these environments. If you think and you look at history of all the countries that we're allies with, and some that we're not, that have been in situations in which they were invaded and occupied, or invaded and the threat of occupation, they have a lot more rich understanding and experience in this than we ever will. Because the threat of invasion and occupation of some of our allies and other countries around the world is a lot more than what the United States has. So their mindset is different to begin with. For us to go in somewhere and say that we know better is, in my opinion, pretty arrogant of us. And I think that we need to take a step back and realize that there are a multitude of ways of practicing medicine. And just because we've found what we've documented and what we do is not necessarily the end all be all. A good example of just practice in general is the way that we treat appendicitis versus the way that other countries treat appendicitis. There are other countries that treat appendicitis with just giving antibiotics and then watching and waiting and seeing whether or not someone actually needs surgery. And the United States is quick to cut. So, but it has been proven time and time again, there's not necessarily superiority between those two. So it's just a difference of opinions between the countries and how we practice medicine. So that's what we have to be very careful about. Like, we can't just go into somewhere and assess, like, you guys don't know what you're talking about. I think the other thing too is every country has different rules. Like, a medic in a different country is not the same as what a medic here is in the United States. I mean, a medic in the civilian world in the United States is not the same as what a medic can do in the United States military. Right. So it's the same in between countries, and we have to, I don't think we should just go in there and tell them that they have to change how, like, who their medics are and what the medics do. I think we have to be very diplomatic. We have to get the people who do diplomatic stuff involved to explain how it would benefit. But ultimately, if the lift is too big for them to, like, replicate what the United States does, we have to figure out how they do it and then work with what they have and say, okay, how are we going to achieve the same treatment goals? So how are we going to address the immediate life threats, you know, the truncal hemorrhages, et cetera, with what they have available? It can be very costly. It can be very time consuming and frustrating and ruin relationships if you just try to force the American way and the American structure on someone else.
Yeah.
So
I think that's a general theme I've seen in my life, is that Americans, we come in, we're like, oh, you need this here, you need this over here. Go ahead, we'll give it to you. You're welcome. And it's, it's multi-million-dollar piece of equipment that they don't have the power to run, nor do they have anybody that can fix the thing. So it works for a time. And then as soon as the Americans leave, like, it's a multi-billion-dollar piece of crap. Yeah. I think the same approach, with medicine is always important, that kind of human interaction. Nobody wants anybody from somebody else's house coming into your house and telling you how things have to be done.
Isn't that the irony of what we're talking about in the first place, of an unconventional war? Like, that's the whole thing you're fighting in the first place, is someone else coming in and telling that country what they need to be doing. It's an occupation. Right. And so we're no better if we start going in there and trying to do the same thing. We're just do it with a smile on our face. Right. Like, that doesn't change the matter of what's happening in that dynamic. So it's very important. Like, the other thing to this, right, is there's a lot that's going on that the U.S. military does as far as, like, engagements with other countries, right? Especially, like, we go out and we teach TCCC to everyone multiple times. Mm-hmm. There's not a whole lot of coordination behind it, but it's so important to have that coordination. So, one, you're not stepping on other people's toes. Two, you're not negating what someone else just did. Like, if you're training something a little bit different, you're just going to confuse that group, right? So there's a lot of reasons that this synchronization has to do it. And then the other thing too is you have one group of people and you've had 7 groups of US come in and train them on TCCC. Like, how many times do they actually have to be trained on TCCC? Right. So this has to be a coordinated event, right? There has to be an initial assessment. What do we have available to us? It's the same thing that we do in operations. Like, okay, you want me to complete a mission. What resources do I have available to me? What aircraft can get me there? What are you giving me to take with me? How much can I take with me? It's the same thing. You go, whoever's in charge, whoever is coordinating this, has some evaluation process to determine what's the structure, what's their laws that we can operate within, because let's be honest, we don't need to do anything that's going to require parliamentary procedures. What what's the scope of practice? Are they allowed to do things outside that scope of practice in times of disaster or war? Et cetera, et cetera. And then there's a training program, just like there is for us in the United States, of crawl, walk, run through each stage. And so you don't have to be taught TCCC and go through a TCCC course 7 times in a period of 6 months, like initial TCCC course, then put it to the test. And then maybe you do something a little bit more, okay, now you're not in a safe area. Like now we actually have to put you in a conflict zone, and go through those steps. And then, okay, now let's make it even difficult where you don't have comms, or, hey, you have to, you have to blend in with the local area, and you can't really, identify yourself as who you are. Right. And that just becomes even more complicated, and you advance through the stages. But I think we're wasting our time and we're wasting our resources if we're not coordinated in this effort within the geographic combatant commands of wherever it is that we are. So,
yeah. I mean, and of course, we have our own faults, especially when you're talking about those training missions where you're just going in and training TCCC. But I guess we forget, we're going to a host nation. So they're hosting us. They're trying to be very friendly and polite. So they're going to sit and listen to your TCCC class for the 12th time with a smile on their face, and they'll continue pretending like they're learning, just because they don't want to be jerks. So we also have to have, I think, as a training team going there, the adaptability to recognize like they actually know what they're talking about. We need to move on.
Right. And be able to assess that. And I think that's where it comes into play of like, just because you're an instructor or something, like you're a TCCC instructor, does not necessarily mean that you can do the work and teaching a foreign country, something like that. Like it takes a certain skill to understand, to be able to really relate with the partner nation. Like it's not as simple as just setting up a classroom in a hospital and just teaching people how to get through it. So there comes a real skill set. And I personally think that anyone who's going out there to work with partner nation groups and teaching this, it's just like the operational units who go and advise and assist operations, like they have training in how to do that. They have training in key leader engagements. Like, so we shouldn't just like go throw a whole bunch of medical people into an area that have never had that kind of experience before. I don't think that's fair on a lot of fronts. So I think it just sets us up for failure. And again, it's a waste of time. And, this day and age, I feel like time is of the essence. So we have to be very calculated with this.
Yes.
So.
Yes. And I mean, those, key leader engagements, those training missions, those are fairly easy to organize when it's talking, military to military or government to government. You mentioned whole of society. The military, regardless of what country you're in, is a small fraction of the population. And during an invasion, everybody's involved, everybody's suffering. And I would imagine the majority want to help resolve this problem. So how would you go about, or imagine how you would go about like educating these people as well? Yeah.
So you brought up a great point. I think it's for the people listening who are not necessarily familiar with how this is organized. So the United States is incredibly unique in the sheer numbers of military health providers that we have. And how much that if we rely, like if a U.S. casualty gets injured, almost 100% of their care is completely within the military system. Like we're talking a fragment of a percent, at least within the last 20 years, would be in the civilian side. And it would be only if there was like a super specialist that they needed, because they would still be like taken home and, you know, definitive care within our military hospitals. Every other country does not have that robust military system. They rely to at least some extent on their civilian infrastructure. And so most of the countries that we're allies with, when you look at their military health system, some of them don't even have forward surgical teams like what we do. Like they only have medics. They have some doctors that take care of their operational units. And then other than that, like they may have large field hospitals that they can, you know, employ, but they don't have the forward surgical teams that we have a decent amount of. And then when you start thinking about all the critical care evacuation teams and whatnot, we have a massive capability with the U.S. health system. So it's unfair to think that we're just going to like make a U.S. system when the country's smaller and they rely on the civilian system. So to your point, like if you're talking about an invasion, like, and let's go back to Yugoslavia again, right? Yugoslavia, like, their partisans relied on the community to provide a lot of care. Like some of them acted as nurses and whatnot. And they employed this. So the sympathizers basically they were helpers and they helped where they could. I think it's hard right now. So as of right now, as of, you know, July, whatever, 2023, military cannot go in and train true civilians. We don't have that authority. That is not within the DoD's prerogative, for good reason. Like if you think about it, because we don't really want to go in and train the civilian populace on military activities that then could, you know, become an international incident and within their country, like that's a diplomatic problem. So Department of State owns that, and the USAID and other groups, other government agencies own that kind of thing. When you talk about medicine and the fact that it's non-lethal, there's certainly thoughts that maybe medicine should be the exception to that rule. And we should have the authority to be able to go in there and do that for this being a perfect example. There's ways that I think, you know, leveraging the other government agencies certainly could help build that kind of response and help prepare for disasters and whatnot, humanitarian assistance and disaster response kind of stuff. There is an authority, by the way, for the military to train true civilians in humanitarian disaster response, but not in the setting for conflict. It has to be for like a true
natural disaster,
a natural disaster kind of thing. It can't be in order to prepare them to support their military operations. So there is, I just want to clarify, there is that authority that the military has, but it's strictly for civilian benefit, not for any kind of benefit towards military or military operation. The difference though is things like this, right? Like podcasts that talk about like, hey, how do we take care of casualties in a prolonged situation? How can we do nursing care? Like, I mean, open source information, like, and it's putting things out there. TWWII handbooks are out open source, and you can use that. Now, do we need to be putting out like how to do some of those advanced procedures that are within TWWII to a bystander? Probably not. We probably need to be a little bit more simplified, but World War II, the French actually put out a layman, for lack of a better term, like a layman's handbook on nursing care and wound care to enable their population of how to take care of wounded soldiers or wounded individuals. That kind of thing of like just empowering a neighbor to be able to take in someone who's wounded, watch their wounds, know how to clean their wounds out, be able to recognize if the wound is starting to get infected and not necessarily do anything about it themselves, but then them understand that they have to find someone who can provide advanced care, right? But simple things like, basic pain control kind of stuff, even if you want to get into it, like holistic remedies and whatnot, those kinds of things to potentially arm them, it just decreases the burden on a hospital, for example. So I think using open source document or, means to be able to get information out there that helps anyone. Like, I mean, when you're talking about the, medical ethics, we should do no harm to anyone, right? Like it doesn't matter who it is. So even if it falls into the adversary's hands, and like, okay, so they know how to treat a wound. Like, is that really that problematic? But ultimately, you're empowering a lot of people who are going to be otherwise suffering and scared and, feeling helpless. So,
yeah. Like G.I. Joe said, knowledge is power. So just giving the people, really anybody, I think, the tools to take care of themselves. It just helps everybody. Like like you said, even if it did fall into the enemy's hands, they still have to do it, right?
Yeah.
And then if more of them live, they still have to deal with the medical burden of taking care of people longer.
Right. So there's not like it, and we shouldn't be sabotaging the enemy's ability to take care of their own casualties, right? Like, I mean, that kind of gets into a whole other like thing of ethics and whatnot. So if their logistical burden doesn't allow them to do that, but if they come across information that helps them treat casualties, like, and they're treating humans, then as medical people, like that should be okay. Now, I'm not necessarily saying like, let's buddy up and team up and go forth with each other hand in hand with the adversary. I'm just saying like, the fallout if they get a hold of the open source information on how to take care of wounds is nothing.
Yeah. Everything's open source now. So
yeah.
Right. So, now, is there anything, since we're getting close to an hour here, is there anything that you would, if you were king for a day, okay, and we need to get pushed off in the right direction, what would you change to really start driving us, in the right direction?
The coordination of training or working with our allies and partners, becoming more interoperable. So between services, between our partners, and starting to work on that cognitive agility. So thinking outside the box. Those are the kinds of things that I would start working on, building it into training, training systems and what we do for our own people, like basically working on putting us in scenarios in which all the luxuries that we had available to us, and by luxuries, I don't mean like the running water and electricity, because we didn't necessarily have that in the last 20 years, but the Wi-Fi, because we all had, pucks of Wi-Fi to be able to connect and whatnot. Like that's not going to happen. How are you going to connect, or how are you going to communicate with someone else? Like getting back to some basics, but then also the luxuries of the resupply. You're not going to have normal stuff. You may have to make things out of nothing. And just exercising that cognitive ability, I think, is the first right step in the right direction. I think that we have the things that we need. I think we just have to start thinking about it in a completely different light. And we have to be proactive as a medical community to recognize that we're going to have to work on this and tell our leaders that this is important, and keep pressing that, casualty care in these environments are going to be a lot more challenging. And what we've seen with Iraq and Afghanistan, and the 98% survival rate, was due to the quick evacuation of patients, that and the advancements on the battlefield. And without the quick evacuation and without being able to have those supplies, like we're not going to be able to get to that 98%. That's going to be a lot that's going to be almost unattainable. It's unrealistic to expect that. So the more that we do and telling our leaders that and trying to help them understand what kind of things that we need to get towards. The other thing is the coordination of like helping our allies and partners get to a better place. Make them feel empowered. Empowerment makes them willing to fight. So all the work that the allies did within Ukraine to teach them some of the skills and knowledge that they had going into this conflict made it so they had the belief that they could overcome this. And so that the reason that they've gotten as far as they have is because of that will to fight. And part of that will to fight is knowing that they're going to be taken care of if they get injured. And that's a process that cannot be done when you just get into a country and you have 10 days. Like, you have to set that up well in advance if you have any kind of knowledge that there's that threat. And so we need to be coordinated on it. We need to recognize that it's going to be important to set those things up. And then if I was king for a day, I would certainly give the United States the ability to work with the whole of society approach and really truly work with civilians in providing that medical support, the non-lethal training of just how do you take care of battlefield casualties. So.
Perfect. Reagan Lyons, thank you very much for coming on.
You are welcome. Thank you for having me. It was a lot of philosophical and academic talk, but I appreciate, being able to talk about my work.
Yeah, perfect. That's it for today's podcast. Make sure to go to our website, www.prolongedfieldcare.org. Check out our free downloads and a ton of other helpful information. Grab a bag of our fresh roasted PFC coffee, links in the description below, and stay on the bleeding edge of combat and austere medicine. This is Dennis for the PFC podcast. Out.